This the story of crypto blood and truth blitz. Ask them a cliff high what the truth is. They was just talking about the blockchain. That's when they heard Janet yelling and the cops came. They said give me all your Bitcoin and lock aim. Then Jamie Dimon showed up and the shots rained. So they hopped in a Lambo and took off fast. Welcome to the Block Party Podcast.
What's up, people? The Block Party Podcast, episode number 4, part 2. It's your boy Crypto Blood
and Truth Blitz. Today we're going to finish up with Jim Willie. We're going to talk about a couple things like the possibility of a Fed coin, his thoughts on Maduro and his Petro cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that was fun.
And some other topics that we'll cover as well. So make sure you guys stay tuned. And thanks for watching.
I have a much more negative view on what you just said in reaction. Okay. 5X to short it, does that apply to Wall Street banks, or do they have an exception?
That applies to, I'm assuming, don't quote me on this, I'm assuming
I don't assume anything when it comes to the financial markets in the United States. What I assume, when I do assume anything, is that Wall Street has an exception to commit their crimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Well, we're going to see before long if, for instance, the cryptos bounce back, like Bitcoin bounces back and reaches toward 13,000, 15,000 again. I think it will when it's concluded that some of the negative comments coming from officialdom have no teeth. Mm-hmm.
Most of them never do, and people still, everyone still falls for the same trickery every time. Every time a new.
Well, I know people who say, "Well, I don't want to get in trouble."
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get audited all the time. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, well, it's kind of funny because Obama never fears the police from his anal intercourse.
Oh man. This is why we have Jim Willie on, people, for just that, man. He gives it to you raw. Definitely. Mm-hmm. So, Jim, what about another thing we had on the list of topics to talk about was Maduro's Petro crypto. That was a laugh. I laughed when I saw that. But do you take those types of moves by different countries seriously? He's attempting to essentially tokenize the petro oil supply out of his country. They produce a lot of oil, as you of course know. What are your thoughts?
You're referring to Venezuela.
Venezuela, yes, Venezuela.
Okay, well, you never mentioned Venezuela. You mentioned Maduro, and many people might not know Maduro is their dictator. I'm sorry, president.
Indeed. So what are your thoughts on that move by Maduro, the dictator of Venezuela?
Well, I live in Central America.
Yeah.
I've known some Colombians. I've known some Venezuelans. I've known some Panamanians. And we all have the same impression. We all have the same conclusion. Nothing that the Venezuelan government does is legitimate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nothing that the government does in Caracas, Venezuela, is competent. So when I hear that the Maduro gang, I call it a regime. When it's not a legitimate government, it's called a regime. Right. It wouldn't have been funny to call it the Obama regime. No. But anyway, when I hear about the cryptocurrency coming with the petroleum backing, my first thought is that the Venezuelans will not be able to run it very well without stealing from it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because they're both incompetent and corrupt. So it brings the question, who's going to run their crypto petroleum currency? Because if it's them, no one's going to trust them. Okay, the second question that comes up, or concept that comes up is, well, it sounds like they're just coming up with a means to sell their oil to the Eastern Hemisphere, Asians, without having the payments pass through the Federal Reserve. Right.
Right.
Now, if Venezuela announced, well, we're going to do all of our oil shipments throughout the world in Chinese and Russian currency, they'll get attacked by the U.S. military.
Right.
But if they announce that they're going to do a substantial portion in cryptos and come up with their own little Venezuelan crypto petro currency, the U.S. government might yawn.
Very
okay,
true.
so you got the corruption and competence angle, but you also got the workaround the dollar angle. And do you really think, who are the big customers of Venezuelan oil? The Chinese buy a slug of it. So maybe the Chinese will contribute toward the movement of the Venezuelan cryptocurrency. Here's what I think is going to happen by the end of the year. There'll be a trickle of volume because nobody will trust them. You got to understand, there is a tremendous exodus of wealthy and semi-wealthy from Venezuela, and I know one. He moved to New York City, kept in touch with me, moved to London, and just amazingly worked for a year and a half with J.P. Morgan and said, Jim, I couldn't wait to get out of there. They treat their people like shit.
Wow.
And I said, and they just regard you, Carlos, as a Latino, huh? Not even as a Venezuelan lowlife. And he said, no, they don't. They just look at all Latinos the same, kind of like Americans. They view all as, Mexicans are all the same. Salvadoran, Costa Rican, you guys are all Mexican.
Right.
Showing their ignorance.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Carlos told me that all of his wealthy family, cousins, they left for New York City, they left for Panama, and a couple went to Brazil. So all you got left in Venezuela are the poor victims.
Right.
And they're starting to revolt. And in this wondrous, stable environment is launched a cryptocurrency. I don't think it's going to be trusted.
Okay.
You don't have a stable environment, and you don't have honest people, and you don't have any competence in finance. You've got a raft of foreign accounts from people in the Venezuelan government who stole from PDVSA. They're a standard. They're a state oil company, state-owned oil company. They raped it. And what I'm looking forward to next in Venezuela is not this cryptocurrency. I think it's going to go nowhere. What I'm looking forward to is the people sacking the palace, arresting some of the leaders and saying, we want to return all your foreign stolen money. And, in this environment, they've got a cryptocurrency. Golly, I just can't imagine a worse environment for launching a new currency. Can you?
No.
It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think it would have legs either. There's even infighting.
But they might get one or two clients, though. Jerry, they just might. And who knows? I just think on the other end, it'll get stolen again. Or the Chinese will stamp their foot and say, look, you got to pay down some loans. And if you guys are stealing from your new crypto, we're going to call you on your loans and default you. So I think the entire crypto is going to be within this mishmash of corruption and default.
So what about kind of segueing into from that into sovereign states and cryptos? Is this the future? Will we see countries start to maybe put 1%, 5% of their reserves in one of these or multiple cryptocurrencies? Is that something that you see, Jim? Is The Voice talking about this? Any of your colleagues, are they talking about sovereign entities using cryptos as reserves? I know Ghana was one that I sent you an article about possibly being such a case. What are your thoughts, Jim?
Well, you got to look at the location.
Okay.
Has Ghana been in the news for any kind of competence anywhere with anything ever?
No.
Have they developed anything regarding patents? Do they own much oil? Are they responsible for any cures of disease? Have they even exported clothing? What are they doing in Ghana? I have actually one graduate school friend. His name was Percival. Got college educated in London, and he went to my Carnegie Mellon for a PhD program. Percival, he was from Ghana. Talk about black. Oh, yeah, he used to joke. He used to say, Jim, as I look around here, he had a British accent, so it was pretty funny. Jim, as I look around here, I see many brown faces, but I don't see any black.
I actually had an economics teacher that was from Ghana. Is it not
ironic that Americans call themselves black?
I know.
Because they don't like the word Negro.
Right.
But they're not black. They're brown.
Yeah,
I know, Percival.
Can be very
Anyway,
bad.
Percival explained to me that his country was very poor. It had a little bit of oil, but Nigeria had the big amounts, the big deposits of oil. I think Nigeria is a neighbor of Ghana. They're in West Africa, and they were really subjected badly to the slave trade from 2 or 3 centuries ago. But Ghana, golly, I can't think of anything they've done that puts them even on the map for history. So if they're going to put 1% of their reserves into Bitcoin, I got a different question for you. Where do they get their reserves? Okay, I don't know. What do they export? I don't know. A little bit of oil? I don't know. Okay, Zimbabwe might be the place, and this is ironic as hell. They're working on a gold-backed currency. Can you believe that?
I heard a little bit about that.
They've got a gold reserve center, and it's not being trusted in its early development. And Doug Casey was involved, at least as an outside observer and maybe an interior consultant, that sort of role. But it's gone nowhere in the last 2 years. I expect it to go nowhere because the people involved, as in Caracas, Venezuela, are mostly corrupt clowns. Okay, but we might see something unique like a asset-backed currency in Zimbabwe backed by, say, gold, silver, platinum, and diamonds. You don't know. So that begs the question, could we be seeing in Africa a cryptocurrency movement that might back a group, a basket of hard assets, including gold and, say, diamonds? I don't know. Whenever I hear people say, well, don't you think nations are going to put their reserves into other things like gold and crypto? And I say, what nations outside of Asia and Norway? Norway's an exception. They've got low population, and they had a generation of drilling for oil and gas in the North Sea. Okay, but does Italy have reserves? No, they've got $1 trillion in debt. No, not really. They got 300 and something billion dollars in debt. How about France? Do they have reserves? No, they got debt. How about Germany? Yeah, they do have reserves. So will the Germans invest in Bitcoin, or will they buy gold bullion? So when people tell me that they think a certain country or group of countries might start a trend in putting reserves in Bitcoin, I say, well, will they put more in Bitcoin than they will in gold? I don't think so. Now, the next big move, you guys, is reserves are going into gold and out of treasury bonds. Now, a little bit of the drip on the side might go into some cryptocurrencies, but I have a different impression. It won't go into Bitcoin. It'll go into a nationally sponsored cryptocurrency with some sort of asset backing that will be unique to the country.
So let me interject there, because actually, let me tell you about a story, Jim. Estonia last year attempted to do such a thing. They were looking. So Estonia is a very crypto-friendly country. They were looking to actually start the first ever ICO, basically, of a country. So they were going to have a token that represented their country. You can do different things. They have an e-residency program there. So they were going forward with that, and guess what happened? Mario Draghi slammed the hammer on it and said, "Nope, you guys are part of the EU. You ain't gonna be doing none of that." So it was attempted, definitely was.
Well, there's going to be a lot of interference,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why any movement toward backing a crypto or launching a crypto will have to be done by a marginal state like Zimbabwe and Ghana.
Right.
But they need reserves to do that.
And they don't have any.
Zimbabwe doesn't have reserves.
Right.
All they need to do, oh gosh, the Voice has been banging this point for 5 years. The dumbest people on earth are the Africans. They're loaded with resources and
yeah,
wealthy minerals and you name it. All they need to do is kick out the colonialists, back their currencies with assets like gold, diamonds, and whatever, and enjoy prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they end up getting killed off by the colonialists, bought off by the colonialists, and just stuck in poverty. Look at Congo. I mean, how many thousand people are killed every year just to make sure the colonialists have access to their minerals and commodities? Congo is larger than Western Europe.
Wow.
Take a look at the map. Look at the square miles, square kilometers. Compare it to all the Western European nations you know of. Maybe exclude Scandinavia, and Congo's bigger.
Mm-hmm.
They're loaded with resources, loaded with minerals, and they're stuck in poverty. Oh gosh, there was a great movie. I was just amazed that the movie was made. About 4 years ago, starred Sean Penn. He was an assassin working for a British group, and all they wanted to do was make sure that the new Minister of Mining in the Congo was in their pocket. So they were murdering to maintain the colonialist link to Congo and keep those cheap contracts going. Well, I tell you, that's very much the personality of Sean Penn. Didn't he turn down an Oscar for, what was it called? Mystic River, a movie several years ago, like 10 or 12 years ago, Mystic River. About a kidnapping case in Connecticut. Mystic is a river in Connecticut. Mystic, Connecticut, by the way, is a gorgeous city.
Yep.
Yeah, you're in Connecticut, Nick. I got to tell you this one thing. I was at Yale University for part of 1 year. It was an unsuccessful attempt to enter their doctoral program. I didn't last long. With tail between legs, I went home, realized I need a year and a half of various things to bridge a gap, and then I might be ready for the master's program in statistics, and that's what I did, and I actually did quite well. But when I was at Yale, we used to go out to East Rock and get wrecked. And my friend would have some wine, and I'd have some weed, whatever. But this was a long time ago in the 70s. And we'd watch the sunset and do a doobie on the way back, whatever. But the point was, I got to see the scenic beauty of Connecticut.
Right. It is a beautiful state.
And I got to see October. Just a gorgeous state for the fall colors.
Right. Yep.
But anyway, back to the point. It will be the Asians who have most of the reserves. I'm talking about FX reserves from excess and export surplus.
Mm-hmm. Europe
doesn't have export surplus outside of Germany. Maybe the Dutch have a small amount, but maybe the Finns have a small amount, Finland.
And
but
UK
the Europeans
is no longer part of the EU.
They're indebted, and they gave up a lot of their industry to China. Oh gosh, I got a friend here who goes with his Colombian wife in Costa Rica here. He goes every year to Spain. He said, Jim, I just love going to Spain. You know, I'm fluent with my Spanish here in Costa Rica, but we both go and we have a great time in Spain. We go to Catalonia, and which is Barcelona. He said, isn't it fun to try to listen and make sense of a Spanish dialect? So, but he came back with an impression. He said, Jim, it's unbelievable. They gave up their industry. They just gave up all their low-level industry to China. And now they're just importing everything. They got a huge trade deficit. He said, Spain's going to hell. Okay, this is typical of the Western nations. So the Eastern nations have the reserves. The Eastern nations will be the ones that make any linkage whatsoever that is potentially there with cryptocurrencies. And I think they're going to come up with their national versions, as I said, with a unique basket that's, you know, unique to their own advantages. Like if a country has a lot of diamonds, they'll make diamond a big component to an asset-backed cryptocurrency. But remember what the voice said. The crypto money, when it comes, will wreck the cryptocurrencies. Because the cryptocurrencies are nothing more than elegant electronic versions of the dollar, the euro, the pound, and the yen.
Now, when you say we'll wreck the cryptocurrencies, does that include like, a lot of these like utility tokens? Because there's a lot of companies that, like we're Crypto Blood and myself are both personally invested in that have utility use that work on their platforms for various things. So do you mean the cryptocurrencies as a whole, or basically just cryptocurrencies such as like Bitcoin, something that doesn't have an actual utility use but is more of a currency?
Well, we're of the same kind of thinking there. I view Bitcoin as a group, as within a group of a few different currency types, like Ethereum, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, things like that. Those are basically currencies. Those are used to, make transactions pass. The tokens are different. You call them utility tokens. I call them functional tokens. Same thing. Maybe I should call them utility tokens. I think the utility tokens are going to be quite different. I don't think I think they're going to be protected. I think they're not going to be as vulnerable to the attempts made by Western governments to get in the way, to suppress, marginalize, criminalize, do this and you're a criminal. Right. The functional tokens, utility tokens, I've been calling them functional tokens now for a few months. I think they're going to thrive. And they're going to get criticized for not expanding the supply in proportion to the expanded usage. But that will be to the advantage of the holders because they'll
Price
triple and quadruple in value.
Right.
But when they go up in value, will there be a sufficient number of them to handle the expanded usage that is coming? That's going to be a tough balancing act.
Right.
But I think they will. I think they will manage the balancing act. They will expand the supply. I mean, like if Populous for invoicing becomes just ridiculously popular, well, they're going to expand the number of available tokens. And that will limit the upside on the value jumps. But there won't be a whole lot of complaints because it'll still continue to go up, while perhaps Bitcoin might be under siege, attack. The smartest guys I know in this space, and that's about 3 or 4 different guys, have all said the same thing to me, unprompted. I put my money in Bitcoin. I accept money from other third parties in Bitcoin, but I move that money. I move those that account in Bitcoin. I move it to other purposes. I put it in Ethereum and I put it into the functional tokens.
And that's it's funny you say that, Jim, because right now Bitcoin has been suppressed. It's been in a kind of a bear swing here. While contrary to that, we have Ethereum holding up great. It's actually gaining. It's at about 1,100 right now, I believe. Right, Nick? Somewhere around there.
Yeah, but even Ethereum went down a little bit in the last month.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, but Ethereum is kind of, Jim, is the gateway to these tokens.
They run a lot of them run on Ethereum.
Right. So you need Ethereum to actually to gain access to these tokens. They're all pegged, most of them, not all, but I would say about 95% of these tokens, utility tokens, are pegged with Ethereum and run on the Ethereum blockchain. So I mean that still aligns with what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, that's neat. That's great to hear. You guys heard it first here on the Block Party podcast. Jim Willie predictions with regards to tokens and versus cryptocurrencies.
These points are not made by me as a result of extensive research. They're from numerous conversations with my expert colleagues, and they're trying to bring me up to speed. And they give me a couple compliments, like, "Oh, gosh, Jim, 6 months ago you didn't know jack shit about this stuff, and now you're actually sounding a little intelligent."
Yeah, I was so glad to hear you start talking about cryptos early last year. It was at least the first. You're on YouTube all over the place, but the first video I heard was like early last year. And I'm like, yes, Jim Willie is finally, kind of getting up to speed with that, because we need, as I said at the beginning, we need people like you who have an understanding of economics, statistics, global finance to really bring your intelligence to this space. So great to have you here.
Well, I'm doing what I can, but honestly, it's a second line.
Yeah.
Where my first line is focusing on things like, will the Chinese use their Aramco investment as leverage to gain permission to buy Saudi oil and pay for it in RMB? That is going to be a dagger in the rib cage of the king dollar.
Yeah.
That is my main emphasis.
Right.
My main emphasis is, how will we start to see the gold trade note? Who will promote it, and on what foundation will it rest? And who will use it? Those are my main points. But on the side, I've got this very strong impression that in the late stages of QE and the unsterilized hyper-monetary inflation, which our boys call good, it's going to cause tremendous crises when the dollar is no longer widely accepted in trade.
So I remember back in
the leak on the side, the air leak on the side. Think of it as large king dollar flatulence is the cryptos.
Yeah, I remember back when I think I want to say 2013. We had Cyprus. I know you remember that whole debacle with banks being, the EU trying to ring fence that area. They limited people's withdrawals. And I was telling Nick, I tell people this all the time, we've seen a run up in cryptocurrencies to these levels without even a real sovereign crisis, sovereign debt crisis. So I can only imagine what will look like, once the house of cards starts to really crumble again,
Well, I think the beneficiaries are going to be gold, silver, and cryptos led by Bitcoin and Ethereum.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Well, why don't we hit that question on black bag and deep state?
Yes,
sure.
I'm glad. Okay, great. So I have that actually queued up already. Okay, so glad you brought that up about black budgets and the deep state projects. Not sure if you're aware of, I'm sure you are, you've heard of Cliff High. Nick and I are huge followers of Cliff High. He talks about Antarctica, a lot of stuff going on down there as far as black projects. And, I wanted to get your take on where are these funds being allocated to? What type of projects do you see, or do you have any ideas about that these governments are doing, or what are they doing with this money?
Okay, first, the black bag projects and budgets. There are three main areas that I see. One is deep space program, sorry.
Okay.
And two is underground cities. And three is bribery of states. Okay, first, the black back budgets. What is the funding? It's a lot of narcotics.
Okay, I've heard you say that before.
Just to put some figures on it, Afghanistan, when we entered there in the year 2000, before we admitted being there in 2003, we were in there before the World Trade Center, but we claimed to invade them after the World Trade Center because of their phony involvement in the World Trade Center, but we were actually there 2 years before setting up the narcotics trade. Okay, we were there in the year 2000. The level of heroin production was about 100 tons. Now it's about 13 to 14 times that, thanks to the proficiency and professionalism and advanced methods used by the Langley folks for chemical processing plants. Okay, so the total value of Afghan narcotics is somewhere in the range of $800 billion a year. That money is not finding its way into building roads, ports, and bridges in the United States, shall we say. Okay. That money is being combined with stolen central bank gold. We claim to go into Iraq to stop weapons of mass destruction when really we wanted to stop Saddam's sale of oil in euro terms. And if you think Saddam was hanged, you're naive. Okay, so we also went in there to steal Iraqi central bank gold. I got pictures of the stolen gold in the January newsletter. Sign up, take a look.
Nice.
Okay, the narcotics and the gold work hand in hand in funding the black bag projects. The three major areas that I refer to. One is the deep space program. You can do the research, and Roswell's for real. The anti-gravitational propulsion system, they're all for real. Reverse engineering, they're all for real. You're talking about 1930 patents here. This is not new. Okay. So we got a lot of reverse engineering, and we've been devoting a lot of the stolen gold and narcotics money into building a fleet that runs around the solar system. I'm talking about million-mile-an-hour travel, make it to Mars in, not weeks, but maybe a day or two. Not very hard to do. And they got a military base on the dark side of the moon. And this is all associated with the Bush crime family linked to their narcotics. So Papa Bush is not a smart man. He's just at the right place at the right time. And I hear Barbara really ran the show a lot more than he did. He's just a dumb shit who got in the right place at the right time. And right now he's...
Kind of like Hillary and Bill,
huh? Yeah, okay. Hillary and Bill, that's, two Rockefellers together that don't produce children. Chelsea's father, by the way, is Webster Hubble. Take a look. Just do a quick web search of Webster Hubble and his mouth, Chelsea Clinton and her mouth. Put them side by side, and you go, wow, they look the same. Okay. So you combine the narco money with the gold money, and you work through the reverse engineering and add 30 years of, good Western technological advancement. And yeah, we're making progress. I heard one military guy say he had contact with me a couple of years ago. We had extensive conversations. He said, 1/3 of all U.S.-based UFOs our U.S. military going out for joyrides, having fun. Hey, let's go follow that commercial airliner and let's just run circles around him to scare the piss out of him. And then let's go home, have dinner. Okay, the second purpose for the gold and narco funding is underground cities. There's a network of them in the United States. They're connecting Denver, and they're connecting Langley, Virginia.
The Denver airport.
And when you hear of a mysterious earthquake, gosh, I remember the earthquake that happened in, September of 2011 in Virginia. Now, that wasn't an earthquake. Earthquakes don't produce 50-mile-an-hour consistent winds that bring about a halt to the Tidewater Tide minor league baseball game. Okay, that was your backdraft of exploding an underground city and calling it an earthquake in the press when it did not have an earthquake seismic signature. Okay, there have been a couple of other exploded underground cities. I heard that there was a base outside San Diego that got exploded, and I've heard that there's a base somewhere on the Alaskan coast that got exploded. There have been a few. Okay, so they got a network of underground cities. Well, what are they for? They're for escape routes for the elite when they wreck the planet Earth.
Right.
But that's getting interrupted. I don't know a whole lot about that, but I will say what the Voice has told me. He said a lot of mid-level globalists have been killed off. And a number of mid-level globalists have signed on to the positive accord with the White Dragons. You got the White Dragon, Confucius types versus the Western Satanist types. The Center for the Western Satanism is London Centers, Rothschild Castle, and the Vatican. Yes, the Vatican is a Satanist center. Time to wake up, people.
Yeah, agreed.
The third purpose of this narcotics and gold black bag funding is to bribe nations. I'll give an example, keep it general. They approach country X and say, look, we'll give you a few $1 million each to your top 10 government officials and bankers and lead think tankers, a couple $1 million a year each, if you promise to stay devoted to the dollar and to block Chinese bank accounts. So that means country X will go down with the dollar. They'll suffer unspeakable price inflation when the dollar has its death pathogenesis. And country X is doomed, but their elites are going to be all rich, and I guarantee you when the trouble really hits the fan, they'll be in Panama. All right, so that's the deep space funding and what it's used for. I don't really want to get into much about Antarctica. I don't know a whole lot about it, but what I do hear, it just curls my ears. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Craigslist has a number of job openings in Antarctica.
I've heard, yeah.
Wow, I didn't even know about that.
And these Western elites are doing quick trips to Antarctica to pay homage to somebody?
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they got an ET center down there. I just saw a strange movie again. I didn't watch the whole thing. I've seen it before. It was when aliens meet the predator. Alien versus predators.
Right.
It's the old Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator. Nasty looking 7-foot creature. But they met up against the other types of predators, and they met in the caverns of Antarctica. So, Hollywood has its way of letting us know what's going on, but in coded language and in weirdly shrouded scripts. But But I just love the way Hollywood tries to rewrite history and get the dumbass masses to buy into their dumbass stories.
And most of them do.
Yeah, most of them do.
And, you know, I find one actor who's in a number of them, and that's Mark Wahlberg. He was in the Boston Marathon movie.
Yep, he was.
That bullshit story. He was in the Deepwater Horizon movie, where they really did not implicate or incriminate Halliburton. And I wonder, did he get the Transformer role for 2 movies as a reward for doing duty to the deep state?
That's a good question.
You know, funny little questions to leave you with.
Yep.
Well, Jim, man, we really appreciate you taking your time out to come on the Block Party podcast. We'll definitely have to have you back on in the near future as things transpire and change, and we've got new stories and new things coming up on the plate. So thank you again, Jim.
Well, let's just watch to see how the cryptos get attacked.
Yeah.
Because it's coming. It's coming like night follows day.
Yeah, I've been saying
and
that.
I'm really curious to see if they're going to be stupid enough to try something that they cannot enforce.
Right. I think that's why they haven't so far. They don't want to show their hand too early.
Well, that's why they came up with the CME futures contract. They don't want to come up with rules. They just want to come up with a tool to suppress the price and force liquidation. I didn't know that it was all, Bitcoin to cash. So they've created a leveraged liquidation tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Cliff High says that they're going to screw the pooch on that, and we're trying to figure out how that's going to come to fruition, or when or if. But he says that it's not gonna last. So we'll have to see what happens.
I think it's going to be an empty room. Again, they need the legitimate cover of real, actual, large-scale commerce that requires price hedging.
Right.
And where is it? If they have a suppression tool that cannot rest on the back of a rhino that's doing legitimate runs, then it's not going to work.
Right.
And that could be the point that Cliff High is making. I don't know.
Could be, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah. Well, again, Jim, you guys, make sure you jump over to goldenjackass.com. Jim Willie is the editor of the Hat Trick Letter. I've been following him for, like I said, 8 years plus. This guy is on it. His predictions have been spot on. And we really thank you for coming on today, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
All right. I'll talk to you guys.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to observe different perspective of informed and intelligent people, and it's interesting. It really is.
Yeah. Well, again, we hope to have you back on, and it's your boy Crypto Blood
and Truth Blitz,
and this is the Block Party podcast. People, we're out. Holla.